Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Maya Shwayder. Earlier this month, WCA-TV and the Watertown News were scheduled to host a Democratic primary debate between the two candidates running to represent the Middlesex and Suffolk State Senate District. Unfortunately, that debate had to be canceled, and we were unable to find a new date and time that worked for everyone involved before the September 1st primary. So, in lieu of that debate, we are happy that we can still host two interviews with the candidates and still give voters an opportunity to hear directly from both of them. I will be asking each candidate the questions we had prepared for the debate, and to keep things fair, I am asking both candidates the same number of questions on the same topics. Each candidate will also have 1 minute for an opening and closing statement. Both interviews will be made available online at the same time and will air on WCA-TV's public channel on a rotating schedule, with each candidate given equal opportunity to air first. So joining me for this first interview is Incumbent State Senator Will Brownsberger. Senator Brownsberger, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Please, you may proceed with your opening statement.
Well, thank you. No, look, I'm a public servant. I'm a true public servant. I've been working hard for the past 15 years in the state Senate, and it's been a privilege for me to serve. I am someone who listens carefully to my constituents, who's widely available to my constituents, and I respond to my constituents. I get back to them, I let them know what I think, and I let them know what I hope to be able to do, and I respond with integrity and accuracy and completeness. And then I go and I do the work, and I do the work hard. And those are the things that people can see. People know that I respond candidly, because I never don't tell people what they want to hear. And I do the work, but the thing that people really need to know and be able to see is that I get results, and that I've got a great record of doing that, and love to talk about the results that I've been getting in every session. And I hope you're going to stop me when I'm going over time. Feel free to just, use that left finger and I'll know what you mean.
That was exactly on time. Good job.
Okay.
We are going to talk about the results that you've been getting.
Okay.
I want to start with how you've been representing Watertown.
Thank you.
Because you live in Belmont, you grew up in Watertown.
Yep.
How do you make sure that you're properly representing Watertown's priorities when you're the one at the table for us at Beacon Hill?
Oh, listen, I work closely with all of my local partners. I'm so just proud of the close relationship I have with basically I have a close relationship with all the city councilors. Most of them are supporting me in this re-election, and the school committee, and just all my constituents in Watertown. I paid equal attention to all parts of my district. At any given moment, one part of my district's facing a particular challenge. Watertown had this challenge with the property tax issue, which I jumped on. Watertown's been doing this great work in Watertown Square, which I leaned in to provide funding for. Watertown needed to redo Salt and Stall Park. And really the biggest thing for Watertown has been getting shortchanged on local aid for many years before I got to the Senate, and sort of identified the problem and changed the formula. So I've really helped Watertown financially. But those are the things that I'm doing for Watertown, and it's just constantly paying attention to what Watertown's needs are.
You touched on several different topics that I want to come back to.
Okay.
You brought up the tax issue.
Yep.
That had come up, the home rule petition.
Yes.
This was obviously a big deal in Boston. You had said previously that you thought it was going to pass no problem, and it took right up until the end of the last session. So
well, no. When it came to the Senate, it took about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
But
so let me explain how the process for home rule petitions work.
Please, I know that you love. Yeah. I know that you love processes. That's what we like.
Well, I like results, but it's important to understand how you get there. A home rule petition gets filed in the House, and when the House approves it, then it comes to the Senate. So it was whatever it was, 9 months or a year in the House. It was 2 weeks in the Senate. Boom, done. We got it done very fast, just as I said it would. And I think it's also worth emphasizing, this is very different from what Boston was doing. So Boston had a home rule petition that would further skew the arguably unfair difference between businesses, which could be small businesses, and residents. And Watertown wasn't trying to further skew that difference, but just to sustain the difference, which was the compromise reached over time.
Mm-hmm. As you said, it didn't take very long in the Senate, but do you know what the nature of the holdup was when it was over in the House?
No, and I don't know that it was a holdup in particular. I mean, I can't speak to that. but I don't, it's done in plenty of time for Watertown's process. Watertown didn't need that ruling for another couple of months. I mean, it was, it's not going to be doing this until October, November, actually December. So we're in gobs of time. Everything's under great control.
Okay. You mentioned you've had your job now for 15 years.
Yes.
And you've risen to one of the most powerful roles in the Senate as Senate pro tempore.
Yep.
Speaking, as we were earlier, about Watertown's priorities and Watertown's interests, have you ever had to go against what Senate leadership wanted in order to support your district?
Well, yeah, there's really been one area where, I mean, look, I'm one of the key people in the Senate. Senate President Spilka is the president, and there are several of us who are part of that leadership team. And an area where we have had real conflict is on MBTA funding, because as a Boston senator, as a Boston, Watertown, Belmont, Cambridge senator who's focused on public transportation, I mean, I believe I actually have more people who ride the T in my district than any other district in the state. I mean, then that's the Green Line, because Alston and Brighton just all served heavily by the Green Line. So my focus is the MBTA, but other senators tend to have a little bit more of a regional focus. And so Senator Roderick's Ways and Means Chair is from Fall River, and Senate President's from West Suburban Boston. So that's an area where we've had some conflict. And yes, we've had some conflict about that. But we've gotten to a good place, and I'm really proud of the level of funding we've been able to achieve for the T over the past few years. Now, even with the COVID money, the ARPA money having gone away, we've been able to continue to grow the T's funding. And so that is what is really needed, is to increase the staffing. So they've gone from 5,500 to 6,500 to 7,500, and with the newest funding on their way to 8,500 employees. And that's what we need, is that depth, so that people aren't working too much overtime, so that there's somebody there when somebody else is sick, so that people aren't burning out, so that they can provide adequate oversight for all the projects. And so and I really feel that's sort of the missing element that we kind of learned was missing, in the prior decade under Deval Patrick's leadership, under Governor Baker's leadership. I think they did a great job increasing T capital spending, but they didn't do enough on the people side. They didn't focus on the people problems at the T. Now we have a manager who understands what it takes to run a train system in Phil Lang. He's a trained guy. He's the first trained guy that's been running the T in a long time. We've had lawyers and financial people, and now we've got a trained guy running the T. And trained guys understand you need people to run the train system. You can't just turn the knobs and spend more money. So that's been an area of conflict. Thank you.
Since you brought up MBTA, that was one of the topics that I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah. We solicited some questions from Watertown organizations and nonprofits, and the Charles River Chamber had this to ask you about the MBTA. They said for more than a decade, the MBTA has had to ask the legislature for money to cover its budget each session. How could we fully fund the T?
So look, I think that's a great question. And if you look at the whole reform arc of the T, right? It used to be that the T would reverse fund, and so it was extremely political. They would they'd sort of spend what they needed, and the legislature would true it up. So we came up with a forward modeling. This is before my time. They came up with a forward funding model that said, you're going to get a penny on the sales tax, and that's going to generate now it's 1.2, 1.5 million, which is a very substantial portion of the T's budget, like 60, 70%. You're going to have a couple other revenue sources, and then you're going to have your fare revenue. That's what you have to work with, manage to that. When the recession hit, the legislature chipped in on another stable component of just said, look, we're going to give you another, whatever it was, 160 million a year, just to sort of, because the tax revenues had dropped so much, you wanted to maintain that stability. Now we've seen the need to provide additional funding, and we've been providing it through an annual budget, I'll say fight, because it has been a fight. But I definitely would support, increasing on a formula basis, whether it's a larger portion of the sales tax, whether it's a portion of the new fair share tax, just commit a certain amount of additional funding on a formula basis to the T, so it wouldn't be the subject of annual challenging negotiations.
Mm-hmm. You've previously written on your blog about the need to bring rail service to your district.
Yeah.
This was a few years ago, but I'm curious, would you still advocate for bringing rail service to Watertown?
Bringing rail service to Watertown. What that means in practice is increasing service through the Waverly Station, which is, there's the Waverly Station and there's the Alston-Brighton Station. It's not like we're bringing a new railroad line through Watertown. That's not.
There used to be trolleys.
Yeah, but that's not a railroad. I mean, that's streetcars. Those are buses now. And the buses are more flexible than the trolleys if you're going to run on the streets. Trolleys kind of have to stay in the same place. Buses can go around problems, and they're better, which is why that we've gone to them basically everywhere. But my priorities for the T, number one, fix the subway service, and they've made enormous progress on that. And I had participated in a visioning process that sort of came to a crunch halt when COVID hit. And when the problem sort of emerged, I said, let's step back. I understand that management bandwidth is finite. I want you to do one thing right. Get the subways running. Number two, get bus service regularized. And the MBTA has launched a Better Bus project. They're moving in the right direction on that. And three, improve, transform the Green Line. I think of myself as the senator from the Green Line. I've adopted that moniker when I first got elected, and I've pushed to create a Green Line vision. They had no Green Line vision when I became senator. I remember going to the then general manager of the T, and she really didn't have much to say about where it was headed. But now they've developed a vision for Green Line transformation, which involves a new set of cars, which will have much better capacity, much better handicap accessibility, and overall greater capacity, and then fix the tracks, fix the signals, fix the power, and fix the stations. And the product of that will be a Green Line with roughly doubled the current carrying capacity and, of course, improved reliability. Now, that's work in progress, and it is the top priority in the MBTA's capital program. So those are my top priorities for the T. Now, where the regional rail model has gone, to sort of come back to the beginning of your question, which was what about rail for Watertown? Mm-hmm. The regional rail component has morphed a little bit in terms of how we think about it. I have a vision of, satellite stations, at 128 and 95. There's a good location on 93 just north of 95. There's a good location near Route 2 and 95 for satellite stations. I honestly don't see that vision materializing. The vision would be people would drive to those stations, and they'd have rapid rail service. That would generate super rapid rail service between, and frequent rail service on the Fitchburg line, which serves Watertown through Waverly, on the Worcester line, which serves Watertown through Alston-Brighton. But that's not where people are really headed right now. What they're focused on is improving the, sort of clock face service on the existing lines. And, if they can get that down and improve the rail service, I think that's the next priority. That's next gen. It's not great, but that's really next gen. And right now we don't have that. The rail reliability is not that great. All too often rail is late. So I think if getting those just to reliable on a schedule as promised, that's the next thing. And then we can talk about it after that, but that's the next goal.
Maybe a T stop in Watertown in 2050, 2060,
I don't know.
Don't have to convince you.
Yeah, I'm not going there. I think there's some basics that we need to get right, and I do think there is a vision for high quality clock face service, which can get somewhat more frequent, but getting up to really high frequency involves a lot of new track investments, not all of which are actually possible within the existing right of way. So I think that's why the vision has kind of condensed towards getting that good clock face, meaning it's always going to come at X after the hour and that kind of thing.
I want to shift gears to immigration now.
Thank you.
One of your opponent has pointed it to your record on immigration as one of the reasons that he's running. He's argued that you haven't done enough to protect immigrant communities. What's your response to that? Is there a specific legislation that your opponent do you think he isn't giving you credit for?
Well, I think we're doing great. First of all, Massachusetts was way ahead of other states in limiting the role of our police in holding people for ICE. Our courts said in 2017, almost 10 years ago, you cannot hold people for 1 second so that for ICE to come pick them up. Other states, most of the states, even very progressive states, are still doing that. They're holding people beyond any state level justification for holding them. We stopped that, which is why people backed away from a focus on the so-called Safe Communities Act, because that court decision came down. The next thing we did, ahead of many other states, is grant people licenses to drive without reference to their immigration status. We want people to drive. We want people to be insured, and we're not going to worry about their immigration status. Big step forward. That was the top priority for immigrant folks, and that's something I was pleased to support and push forward. Then, when the new administration came in, we were one of the first to step up to the plate and make sure that people could get represented. Now, by the way, I think we have some work to do on that. I say make sure that people can get represented, but I'm not sure the rubber is meeting the road. The people are actually connecting with the resources that we're intending for them to have in every case, but it's happening in a lot of cases, and that's our direction of work, which is an operational thing, which from a legislative standpoint, we've really stepped up to the plate on that in a year ago. And then in this session, we've passed the broad immigration reforms, which all the immigrant advocates are thrilled with, right? I mean, we had the most joyous signing ceremony for this progress, which keeps hospitals, schools, courts safe from ICE, or at least asks ICE to stay out of those places, which does make clear that, underline that our police will not be doing ICE's job. And this is the part that I worked on, created the ability to sue federal agents when they violate the US Constitution through their activities on the street. And that's a big step forward. Only a couple of states have done that. So overall, I think Massachusetts has actually been ahead of other states, and we've certainly moved very diligently with due deliberation in this session to really complete the set of protections. And people who are close to the issue and are very happy with what we've done. And I would also underline, this is important, the leadership of that process in the state Senate, I contribute some to that, but the real leadership for it was the people who, in the state Senate, the state senators, who are themselves first-generation Americans. And two of them, the two first-generation Americans in the Senate, wouldn't be there but for my efforts during the last redistricting process to make sure that their communities were represented, to make sure that there was a district in Lawrence, which has always been hugely Hispanic, or for decades, could finally elect an Hispanic senator that had been carved up in the past. And we'd lost a black senator in Boston. We hadn't had a black senator for a while. And the districts I drew allowed for the election of a black senator. So that commitment to representation, which I diligently and with great political effort, because making those changes was not convenient for the other senators around them, made sure that representation was there. And I'm deeply, I'll use the word proud of, what those folks did, what we were able to do together to protect immigrants.
Let's move on to some questions about housing.
Thank you.
Intersect a little bit with what we were talking about a little bit earlier with MBTA.
Yeah.
You said back in February, there was a housing forum that the MBTA Communities Act had put communities through a lot.
Yes.
Watertown has zoned for almost double the housing of what the state requires as per the MBTA Communities Act. Housing advocates have actually said that there's more needed to provide enough housing to make things cost affordable. Would you support zoning for more housing, or would you rather wait as per what Watertown has already zoned for and see what happens?
So the answer is we in the Senate voted to legalize two-family homes everywhere, which is a very ambitious statewide measure, and I'm hopeful that will end up in the final version of the economic development bill. So first of all, I just want to salute Watertown. I think the Watertown City Council, Watertown manager have done a fabulous job leading a process to more than double what they were required to do under the MBTA Communities Act. Not every community has done that. So Watertown is just a standout performer. But to do more, yes, I've been clear that I would support doing that. And in fact, voted for it in June to upzone the entire state and to upzone every single family zone neighborhood to 2-family, respecting existing dimensional requirements. Which that's a reasonable balance. You're going to have the same bulk of homes. You're not going to cut down all the trees, but they could have 2 doors. They could be 2-family homes. So that's a big step forward. That's a lot of additional potential housing. In addition, we focused, and this is the equally important focus, is on the process, what it takes, the complexities that it takes to just build housing, the site plan review process, local conservation rules, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, wrinkles in the zoning, not what's grandfathered, what's not grandfathered. So we took aim at a whole range of that. I like to think of it as a thicket. It's no one vine in that thicket is really that big a deal. It's just all of them together that make it hard to move housing projects forward. So we've taken the scissors and cut a whole lot of those vines, dozens of provisions that tend to slow down or have the potential to slow down housing production or just production in general. And that's in negotiation now between the House and the Senate. The Senate's voted for it. I think the House did some great work on that too. They did the Yes in God's Backyard thing, which basically creates on a whole lot of sites in the state, where there's been religious institutions that have the potential to develop multifamily housing. So we've created the opportunity for them. I mean, the House has voted for that. We haven't done that yet.
I'm so sorry. Continue.
Thank you. No, my true hope and expectation is that negotiation process will be one where people are saying, okay, let's do it all. And I'm pretty hopeful we're going to get to that place.
I think you addressed a little bit of this already, but I have a submitted question now here from Housing for All Watertown.
Mm-hmm.
I said the Senate Ways and Means Committee recently proposed legalizing duplexes by right, which could unlock the construction of thousands of new homes statewide. When you're thinking about solutions to the housing shortage in Massachusetts, which you've already talked a little bit about that, how do you weigh the need for the state action against the history of local control?
No, I mean, that is a great question. And there's a balance to strike. And I think, we're taking a big step forward because I voted for that. I think that does diminish local control. I think there's always a balance between statewide policy and goals and local control. Local control is not a sacred thing. It's something you want to allow to the greatest possible degree. But there are folks that if they had local control would put toll gates up at the edge of their community to prevent cut-through traffic. And obviously if everybody did that, nobody would get anywhere. So we do have to have statewide policy. And in this case, a statewide change that says 2-family everywhere, respecting local zoning dimensional decisions. That's a big step forward and one that I'm pleased we're taking.
A question from the Watertown Business Coalition, more to just the question of affordability in real estate. What would you do to help communities you represent solve the problem of affordable spaces for small businesses?
That's a great one. Solve the problem of affordable spaces for small businesses. That's a problem I've been kind of leaving to the private market, and I can tell you I don't have a stock answer to that. But what I will say this though, I think the things that we're doing that generally streamline development process are pro-housing, but they're also pro-business development as well. That's what I would say.
I have a similar question from the Charles River Food Co-op, which, as you may know, the single biggest barrier that they've been facing towards opening a commercial site has been the cost of real estate.
Yeah.
They would like to know, if reelected, how would you work at the state level to help co-ops and other independent small businesses be able to rent retail space in a dense, expensive market like Watertown?
Yeah, I don't have a solution for the rentals, but one thing I do want to emphasize is underlining the first of all, we will work with any nonprofit organization that's trying to do a good thing. And I've done that, for example, in Brighton. We actually, in the most recent budget, provided a significant amount of funding to rehab space for the Brighton Food Pantry. So I'm willing to step up and solve problems for local organizations, that are trying to serve a critical need, like these food co-ops. And I've been a big supporter of the Healthy Incentive Program, and adequate funding for SNAP administration and so forth. So we do want to support the farm to school programs. All those things that are about healthy food are high for me.
I want to touch on local aid, which is something else that you brought up just at the beginning when we started talking. Um, Cities and towns all over Massachusetts are fighting rising costs for school, safety, infrastructure. Local officials are saying the state aid hasn't kept pace with what they need. What changes would you support to strengthen local aid, and how would those be benefiting your district? Where would you like to see the aid go?
So my district, all of the communities as communities from a tax capacity standpoint are relatively well off. Cambridge is like amazing. Belmont and Watertown are good in their own way. Belmont a little more on the residential base, Watertown a lot more on the commercial base. And Boston's really very strong overall as well. It has a strong commercial base. So from a statewide perspective, they're perceived as affluent communities, if you sort of rank them out. So the challenge has been to make sure that we do, as a public policy matter, want to provide deep funding for places like Holyoke, where they're not going to have a school system if we don't basically pay for it from the state level. We have to do that. We have to address those most needy communities. And at the same time, and it was kind of a compromise that actually got worked out a little bit before I got to the legislature, was to say that every community should get 17.5% of their foundation budget at least from the state. That was the sort of wealthier communities versus the less wealthy communities. Let's make sure that we level up the wealthy communities so they get at least 17.5. And that's the thing that Watertown wasn't getting for a number of years, even after that compromise. So that's been my focus is, in this environment, to continue to grow education aid. And so I was proud to work with my colleagues in the Senate to pass the Student Opportunity Act, which we have then, over a period of 7 sessions, 7 years, not sessions, implemented. Significant increase in state aid. And now we need to keep reviewing that and keep building state aid with a new Foundation Budget Review Commission. What does that word mean? Foundation Budget Review Commission? A new consensus development process to decide, how are we going to define the needs of each community. The foundation budget is, how much does this community need to educate its students? And okay, so a number comes out of this formula. Well, that number might be wrong, right? It might not be enough. And that's basically what communities are saying, is we need more. So yeah, let's go back, let's review that formula, let's redevelop it, and then let's make a commitment to meeting it. And we have working with us, working in our favor, the Fair Share Amendment that dedicated new funds to transportation and education.
Let's talk a little bit about climate change.
Please.
We've had a very, very hot summer.
Yeah.
And Massachusetts has set some pretty lofty climate goals, cutting greenhouse gases 50% by 2030, which is only 4 years away, reaching net zero by 2050, which is, of course, closer than we think it is. What steps are you going to take to ensure that the state can achieve these goals in this time frame?
Let's be really, really truthful, right? Because that's what we need to be. I mean, we haven't really, nobody's been really quite willing to say this, but we're not on track to meet those 2030 goals. And there's really no lever we can pull to hit those 2030 goals. And that's a statement about Massachusetts. I'm sorry about my phone. I turned my phone off, but my watch just keeps picking it up. It's a statement about Massachusetts, but it's a statement about the world too. Because what's happened is, developed nations, when we set our climate goals or started talking about climate goals back in 1992, the problem was the developed nations. We accounted, Europe, the United States, Australia, Japan, 40 quote unquote developed nations. We were the problem. But that's actually no longer true. So even if we just sort of turned off the lights in America and in Europe and so forth, we'd still have more greenhouse gases than we did before, being emitted than we did before. And they're continuing to grow in the developed nations. And actually, there's 100 countries in the world that have emissions that are only 1/4 of the United States emissions per capita. So, the potential for increased emissions through development is just very, very real. So we have a challenging situation. Where does that leave me? Number one, we have to focus on resilience. We have to be focused on what does resilience mean. I represent a district that is close to sea level, so sea level rise is an issue. Protecting the Charles River Basin, protecting the Mystic River Basin, those are infrastructure project priorities for me. We also have to be thinking about the grid. We're going to need the grid to be more robust and have more carrying capacity to support decarbonization, number one. But guess what? To support air conditioning. Air conditioning is going to be a life and death thing, as we get into these hotter years. We need to make sure that everybody ultimately has access to air conditioning. It is not a luxury. If we go back to a time, many of us still have it on our brain, air conditioning sounds like luxury. No, that's going to be just as important as home heating for people's survival. And if 90, 100-degree days, it's a safety issue for a lot of people. And so we need that. Number one, the infrastructure. Number two, the grid. And number three, we have to keep supporting technology development and improvement. The problem for us and the problem for the world is that we have some great new technologies in solar, wind, heat pumps, and so forth, but they're not so radically compelling that everybody is adopting them. If they were better, even better than they are, it wouldn't be like we have to pay people to do these things. They would be doing them without subsidy because they'd be so desirable. And I think there is room for technology improvement in all those spaces, and we need to continue to supporting that. So those are my three things.
I've got two more topics I want to touch on. First is education, because the school districts in Belmont and Watertown and Cambridge have all been able to open some new school buildings
Yes.
In the recent years, which is great. School buildings make a big difference, but how do you ensure that the state budget includes funding for education beyond just the space for education?
Well, I do think the school building authority thing is an issue still in Boston, right? You didn't mention Boston in that link.
Sure.
Because and actually there's some big management issues there. I mean, Boston's had a significant decline in enrollment, so it's in that awkward situation where it needs to restructure its system physically, and that's one of those deep challenges that so far our Boston leadership hasn't really been able to deal with. But funding for education, going back to what I talked about a minute ago, that's about that foundation budget growth, which we have done, increased funding for special ed, other forms of special needs, bilingual, and, done all of that. And now we want to keep growing that with a new round of improvements to the foundation budget. And again, for me, and what has particularly made a difference in Watertown, not only with that formula adjustment, which Watertown wasn't getting, and which I've fought successfully to increase, which has resulted in round numbers, $20 million of additional funding for Watertown since we got that done, but also in special education, which is a big need. We dedicated some special funding for Watertown's special education needs. And by the way, meeting special education needs is one of the best ways to serve Watertown, Belmont, Cambridge, and Boston, because the special education formula is just based on how much each community has to spend. How many special education students go out of district to those expensive, $200,000-$300,000 a year kind of placements. And that's not a function of income, right? It's not income modulated. So that's a program that I'm always working hard to support.
Let's close with talking about just your relationship to Watertown politics. Earlier in this campaign, you got the endorsement of pretty much every single Watertown city councilor and two former ones.
Yeah.
3 of them recently defected.
Yeah.
Given your long tenure and this long list of issues that you've worked hard on in your past 15 years, what do you think voters should be taking away from that?
I think they should take away from the fact that 6 out of 9 are with me and rock solid. And I think several of the folks had, and they said, there are differences of opinion with me. Fine. wish they'd sort of thought about those differences initially, because I don't think anything changed. But it is what it is. I'm really grateful for the support of 6 out of 9 Watertown City Councilors. I'm grateful for the support of all the select people in Belmont. I'm grateful for the support of well over 100 town meeting members in Belmont. I'm grateful for the support of all the Cambridge City Councilors who live in my district, and the only Cambridge City School Committee members who lives in the district. And I'm especially grateful, and this is really meaningful, for the support of all of the state reps. My district touches the district of 8 different state representatives, and all of them are supporting me. So that overwhelming support among elected officials, not quite unanimous, but it's overwhelmingly strong, is a testimony to my commitment to working respectfully with everybody. And I will continue to work respectfully with all 9 members of the Watertown City Council. I hope I'll have the opportunity to do so in the next session.
Great. We have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Yeah, no, well, that's it. It's all about service. It's all about service to the community. It's about service to individuals in the community. It's about service to the institutional needs and the built environment in each community. And it's about responding. It's about partnership. It's about listening carefully. It's about doing the work, and it's about getting the results. And I've just got a great track record of doing it. I really beg people to, if you're not sure how to vote, I really hope you'll take a minute and visit votebrownsberger.com. That's where I've kind of collected a lot of the resources that document, who I have been for this community over the past 15 years. And I'm really at the top of my stride as a legislator. I have a great ability to move forward at things effectively on all of our shared priorities. And I really humbly ask for your opportunity to do that. And I look forward to continuing to partner with everybody in Watertown and all across the district.
Senator Brownsberger, thank you so much for joining us here at WCA-TV. It's always a pleasure to have you stop by.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone for watching. As a reminder, this interview is the first of 2 that WCA-TV and Watertown News is conducting jointly with the candidates for the Middlesex and Suffolk State Senate District. Both candidate interviews will be available online and will air on WCA-TV's public channel on a rotating schedule, giving viewers the opportunity to hear from both candidates before casting their ballots. The Massachusetts state primary is Tuesday, September 1st. Please go vote. For WCA-TV and Watertown News, I'm Maya Shwayder. Thank you so much for watching.